Welcome everybody to the British Institute of Florence virtual panel discussion in the Firenze NOW program. This is our first season of Firenze NOW, and the subject of the season is the future of Florence. And this evening we have a panel to debate the subject Future of Florence, International Education and Research. We will start out with a series of statements from the members of the panel, and shortly after that, I would hope within half an hour of starting, we'll open it up to questions and comments from the participants, both on the Zoom and for those who are following us on Facebook Live. When we get to the questions, I will explain the rules of how to do the questions so that it can take it in turns and not have complete chaos. Without further introductory remarks, I will introduce our panel. Our moderator tonight is Marco del Panta, who is the Special Advisor for Higher Education and International to the Mayor of Florence at the Comune. And on the panel, we have, in alphabetical order, Steve Brittan, who is the President of SACI in Florence. We have Linda Campani, who is the Director of Stanford in Florence. We have Giorgia Giovannetti, who is the Vice Chancellor, Pro-Rector International for the University of Florence. And we have Fabrizio Ricciardelli, who has two hats. He's the Secretary of AACUPI, which is the Association of American Programs in Florence, and also he is the Director of the Kent State University program here. That's your panel, and I'll now hand over to Marco, who will make some introductory remarks and will moderate the session.
Thank you, Simon. Good evening, everybody. The title of this session is very ambitious because we're talking about the future of Florence. And I do believe that it's linked to higher education, so it's a very timely and important item to be discussed. Higher education is a sector which is already pretty developed in town. Let's give some figures. We have something like 30,000 students in town. This figure is higher than the figures normally given because traditionally one think about, I'm talking about foreign students, one think about the American university, who is the bulk of the international presence in town, but it's not only that. We have, it's true, we have a large number of American universities, it's 45, but it's not to be forgotten that there's also a European university. There are many private institutions who welcome foreign students, and on top of all this, there's the Florence University, which also attracts a number of foreign students. So all in all, we have the figure I was giving at the beginning, which is 30,000 students. And if you calculate that they stay in average between, let's say, 90, 80 to 100 days in average, it's a presence of 2.4 million to 3 million presence, nights spent in town, which is a very consistent, a very high figure, not so far from the figure of the tourists and the presence of tourists. Well, many, many more, of course, but they're here for a much more limited time. Now, this is the present situation, and we in the Comune, in the municipality, we would like to increase this figure. Is it possible to do it? We believe yes, because the, let's say, market, if we want to speak in economic terms, the market of international students is growing at a pace of 4.2% every year. It's foreseen that in year 2030, the number of international students moving from one country to the other will reach the figure of 380 million. So it's a huge figure. The main destinations are the US, the UK, Canada, and Australia. And this gives you also one key to this, let's call it market, which is English-speaking courses. The reason why these countries attract this high number of students is, of course, the quality of the their academic environment, but also the fact that courses are taught in English. So this is the environment in which Florence has to try to attract more students. And in this framework, we in the municipality would like to create an environment which is more attractive for foreign students. We have an asset, which is the town of Florence, which is very attractive in itself. We attract a huge number of tourists every year. Everything that I say is, of course, in the pre-COVID situation. So this is a very attractive town, and we would like to attract more students and researchers instead of mass tourism. This is not because we don't like or we don't want the tourists, but if we are serious in wanting to develop a more, let's say, an economy with more added value, we have to create an academic environment which is more conducive for this kind of economic development. So in our efforts to try to create a better environment, we have the attractiveness of this town, but we have to do more in terms of creating also an environment which is more attractive for the students in academic terms. So you don't have to come to Florence only because it's a beautiful town, but you have to come because there's an academic environment which is competitive in the globalized world. This is what we are trying to achieve. Now, there's no easy recipe for that. It's not an easy task, but I think that this could be an issue interesting in which the panelists that are now with us tonight, they can help us in understanding how to create this environment, what are the advantages and drawbacks of Florence in this academic environment, what we can do to improve the quality, but also not only from the academic point of view, also for the standards of living, for the administrative procedures, and so on. So we have a highly distinguished panel, and I would like to ask to all the panelists what is their view about the situation in Florence, and especially what can be done to improve the attractiveness of this environment. So I would start by the University of Florence. We have the vice president of the university, Professor Giorgia Giovannetti, and she can give us some indication on how she views this issue. Giorgia.
Thanks, Marco. Thanks for inviting me to the panel. You spoke about the pre-COVID world, and I'm going to speak instead about the post-COVID world. So what I wanted to say is that many things have changed with respect to less than a year ago. And so what we have to do is we have to change the ways in which we attract international students and young researchers. That's the first statement, which I think is important. So let me say in a few words what we have done as University of Florence so far, and then at the end put forward some ideas on what we can do now that the job market is different, now that we cannot use the past strategies, we cannot use the analysis and studies of mismatch that we have done in the recent past. For instance, just to give an example, a study we did for the city of Florence was suggesting that one of the main mismatch was where the skill were needed was the hotel and restaurant. Now, this is one of the sectors which is most affected by the COVID crisis, so obviously we have to change also these kind of things. What has University of Florence done so far? We have had a fairly successful, I will say, in these 5 years in which I've been working on this traditional model. So we have increased the number of programs in English. We have highlighted the high variance that we have in, and that's very typical of public universities, state universities. We have some courses with 250 students, and we have other courses with 30 students. We have professors with PhD in top university and professors without PhD. So basically, if you target the international student to the selected courses, it's much easier to sell the courses. We have done some fine-tuning of the courses with suggestion by entrepreneurs. For the first time, we have had entrepreneurs as part of the advisory board, and we have enhanced cooperation with foreign university in Florence, with cultural institutions, We have provided students with trainship. We have discussed with students, and this was very new for Italian universities, mock interviews, skill and competence needed for job market. So we have tried to change a little the university, but now we have to change much more. We have to change gears. So what we have done is no longer enough to attract top students. It's not enough to attract early career researchers. I think the issue of early career researchers has to be linked to the one of students. So students means BA, master, PhD, and also the postdoc. We have to build a more favorable environment in Florence for the student to attract these people. For instance, linked to the University of Florence, we have some excellence center, which are range from science to humanities. We recently have installed a European infrastructure, which is called Instruct, and this is hosted at the University Center for Magnetic Resonance. And this basically is a unique apparatus for advanced molecular studies in the field of life science of vaccine. This is absolutely crucial in a COVID year, in a COVID period, to highlight the importance of this. We have the LENS, which is a European reference point for multidisciplinary research in light waves. We have a world-leading university museum system, which includes the Museum of Natural History, which is very important. It has more than 10 million specimens, more than 4th century of history. But then we also have Villa La Quiete with works of Ghirlandaio, Botticelli, and others. We have the House of Galileo. All these assets and others, which I, of course, have no time to mention, I think should be shared in joint programs with the foreign university to attract, also with dedicated grants, top early researchers and students. We have some example of best practice with US universities. We are sharing, we are cooperating with a lot of them. For instance, with Syracuse University, we have joint classes with mixed students, which now they are not open this term, but they've been working very well. With Midbury College, we have many of their students attending our courses in exchange of a grant for our student to go and spend a period in a college. With NYU and Stanford, we have organized joint event, and much more was in the pipeline because before the COVID crisis. I think we should build on these experiences and exploit new and innovative programs. And here is where what I propose. The University of Florence is now part of a consortium with 6 European universities, which are Birmingham, Köln, Leiden, Linnaeus, Nantes, and Semmelweis. And this is a European project to give life to the European University of Wellbeing. The topic is actually very attractive for a post-COVID world. This type of universities, this model is challenge the traditional mobility and collaboration schemes. And the idea is to invent new schemes, which are more centered on the well-being of students and staff. And I think we should build on this network as well as on those with a foreign university in Florence, the Cultural Institute, to organize different set of activities. I can be more precise when you have questions, but what I was thinking is having something like nano degrees on specific topics. These nano degrees, which we are going to do within this network of universities in Europe, could be shared with American University, could be shared with Cultural Institute. And this, for instance, could be on specific topic, could be extracurricular activities for our student and international student, but could also be embodied in some curricular activities. Another thing we could do is we could think of specialized path, like if we organize joint lectures, joint event with American universities, with Villa Finali, because we also have the French, with the institution, with all these kind of institutions, which are important and are here. And then we could imagine to have a series of lectures like the one that the British Institute has on History of Art, given by prominent names in different universities, and have a set. And if students also of University of Florence attend a certain number of lectures, they could get a sort of excellence title or something in their degree, or they can get some credit. So we basically give some incentive to students of University of Florence to join activities that maybe are already there, that could be now object of a cooperation. I think that it's very important in this moment to reimagine the cultural environment at Florence. And I have to say, Marco, that we are really lucky that we have an administration which is very, very sensitive to these issues. So I think that's crucial, and I think that will be the success of all this initiative will actually build on your work, on Dario's work, and it will be very, very important. Thanks.
Thank you, Giorgia. No, that's very interesting. We already have an agenda for the next months to work on. You made very concrete ideas of linking the Florence University with the foreign universities which are present in town. So as I said at the beginning, the highest number of foreign universities is the American one. One of the main institutions is Stanford University, and we have Melinda Campani here with us. She's the director of Stanford in Florence. You see in the background the premises of Stanford in the US, if I'm not mistaken. So Linda, you have the floor. How do you view this cooperation, and your students happy to be in Florence? What is missing? What can we do to have a better environment?
Yeah, thank you very much. I want to thank the British Institute. I'm a life member of the British Institute. So as a life member, I commend it for organizing an event like this. And I also want to immediately second what Giorgia just said. We could not have hoped for a better administration to work with. This is very important, particularly in a town like Florence, which has a sort of an inflation of international presence, or used to. And it's very important that the administration is listening and paying attention to all of our issues. Now, I'd like to begin by citing two small quotations that I'd like to sort of set the tone for what I'm about to say. One, it's from Churchill, maybe it's apocryphal, who knows, but I want to pay a tribute to the British Institute. So Churchill, at the end of World War II, said, never let a good crisis go to waste. Never let a good crisis go to waste. So one of the things that I'll briefly touch upon is, what can we take home? What are the changes? You know, crisis etymologically means transformation. So what are the changes that this crisis has brought about? What are the good ones? What are the ones that we can save? The other quotation, again, it's not a very original quotation, is from the leopard, Il Gattopardo. For nothing to change, everything has got to change. So my perspective on the post-COVID world is, A, let's make the best with what we have, with what COVID brought about. There's going to be permanent damage. There's going to be permanent changes. What can we do to make the best of them? Second point is, you know, I think we have to change everything in order for things to stay the same, in order for Florence to be able to continue to attract foreign students, American students, but also Asian students, and so on and so forth. So the two main points that I'd like to highlight under the aegis of these two, if you will, methodological ideas are the curriculum, to begin with, and then new geography. Stanford University, after 2008, the financial crisis, Lehman Brothers, what we've noticed is that a lot of students were migrating away from finances, economics, etc., to other majors, be it computer science, engineering, some to the humanities, pre-med, human biology is a pre-med major at Stanford. So we saw that a real life event had a huge impact on the curricular choices of our students. We suspect that it will be exactly the same this year with COVID-19. So what I would urge everybody to focus on is, in a way that that should be rather proactive. We've got to get there before the students do. We've got to be prepared for when the students come back to Florence. What will be the curricular decisions that the students will make? What will be the topics, subjects, courses that the students will want to take? So we cannot, and I think that some of them are really very clearly there on our horizon. One of them is public health. Of course, you know, pandemics, you know, public health, pandemics in history, but also, you know, how we manage pandemics. We hope never to see one again, but, you know, we might. Another crucial topic, racial history and equity. diversity. There's a pre-George Floyd world and a post-George Floyd world. We cannot ignore it. Social justice. And the other great topic is sustainability. So the big issue, the big question, the big challenge, because these are, of course, very clear in everybody's mind. The big challenge is, how do we embed, how do we weave these topics in our curricula? It should not be an operation of so-called tokenism. It should not be cosmetic. You know, we shouldn't, put a sort of diversity here and there, sprinkle it all over the classes to attract the students. We should really sit down and decide what we want to do with the world as we know it today, as we have it today, and how we can, especially a place like Florence, which has a long history, also a long history of diversity, a great history of sustainability. Think about the Chianti and the olive oil making, and how people live on ribollita and so on and so forth, using the leftovers. So these are critical topics. But so the question is, how can we bring these issues, racial equity, social justice, public health questions, et cetera, into a variety of disciplines, be it literature, the arts, even the sports. But again, we need to think about these very, very carefully. It cannot be just, by putting on lipstick and mascara. It has to be worked on quite carefully. The other point that I'd like to make, and it falls under the title of New Geography. We're all here today, zooming in from a variety of places in the city. Some people may be outside of town. We're on Zoom. We'd rather be in person. We'd rather have a glass of wine after the talk with Simon. But clearly, COVID is going to leave permanent changes to the way in which we communicate. It has created a new geography. It has mapped our world differently. So this is a lot of pros and cons. We all agree that in person is better than via Zoom, but what can we do, for example, already via Zoom, in order to engage with the students before they come back to Florence? How can we lure them into coming back to Florence? Of course, we don't need to do much because they're eager to come back. But I think we should look at ways in which, and this goes for museums, it goes for a number of other institutions in Florence, especially in Florence, which, of course, so heavily relies upon tourists and visitors and students, etc. So Zoom, put it under the name of Zoom, of these, has opened up this new geography. We've got to be able to take advantage of it and maybe engage the students already with Florence even before they come back to the city. Of course, what Giorgia and you, Marco, said is paramount on my mind as well. We need to strengthen the relationships with the local institutions. And Stanford is doing so and has been doing so quite productively with the University of Florence and with other institutions in town. We need to do more of that. And for example, one element, one thing that we could all focus our attention on is called internships. How to get the students engaged in everyday life, and in an architectural firm, in a hospital, in a museum. We've seen that the greater the integration of the students into Florentine life and culture, the better their experience becomes academically, but also as temporary citizens of Florence. One of the last conversations, in-person conversations that I had with Dario Nardella, which luckily was not too long ago, was really centered around the notion of this group, huge group of temporary citizens. And this is a very nice, we can establish a very nice cross-pollination, back and forth, reciprocal, between the city and the visitors. But we have to do it under different terms. We have to use a different lens to look at the same things, to look at the same art, to look at the Duomo, to look at these things, but you need to look at them with new eyes. I'll stop here, and I apologize because I get too excited, and so I'm a bit too theatrical, but that's just that's just me. Oh, thank you.
Thank you, Linda. No, it's very nice to hear somebody who is passionate about his work and who has concrete ideas on how to develop it in collaboration with the local authorities, with other universities and so on. So it was very effective. Let me pass the floor to Steve Brittan, who is the president of SACI. Maybe SACI is not known to everybody. Correct me, Steve, if I'm mistaken. It's the Studio Arts College International.
Correct.
It's an institution based in Florence, but you, apart from being president of this institution, you have a dramatic experience, if I may say so, in developing public policies in the field of research, innovation, and also higher education. And you did it in places like Boston, which is one of the capital in this area, and also in Canada, if I'm not mistaken. So you really could give us some indication on a view of a foreigner who has a lot of experience in this area on Florence. We are not here to say that everything goes well. So also tell us what are the missing pieces, in this dashboard, and what we can do to improve the situation. Steve.
Thank you, Marco. And I also want to echo what Linda and Giorgia had said earlier about the wonderful work you're doing in the city, and it's very much appreciated. I also want to thank Simon for inviting me back. I will try and take a somewhat critical point of view, but many of the points that I'm about to make, I think, resonate very much with what has been said before. And I think, I'd like to go back a little bit and say, before we answer the question of what can be done to support the growth of high quality research in the universities in Florence, is that we really need to take a step back and look at how we're educating the students and how, as Linda was saying, we're adapting to today and tomorrow's challenges. And I would say that the fundamental models and methods for education delivery in many, many ways needs to change somewhat radically in some cases to be more in line with the challenges that we face and the opportunities of our time, making the best of this crisis. The new student needs to have greater capacity for understanding and interpreting the world and contributing in a positive way. And by that, I'm thinking of some of the fundamental capabilities like analytical thinking or problem solving, programming. We talk a lot about emotional intelligence today, especially amongst the designers in this world. Interpretive skills and representational skills, how you're actually communicating back what it is you're learning. So communication being very important. The fact that you have a degree today is actually not enough to guarantee a success in a position in the workplace. And it's important to point out that employers, the businesses out there, are looking for job readiness skills, which a lot of the institutions are not necessarily providing. So we need this kind of open source approach. And universities need to break down many of the silos between the disciplines to encourage more transdisciplinary collaboration from all faculties and disciplines. Some of the key drivers that we need to think about, and also it echoes what Linda was saying, is environment, social equality, and government. It's interesting that the financial world has taken this acronym ESG and have spent in the last couple of years more than $2 trillion just in this sector of socially responsible investing. That's quite telling, but it is very much about where we need to be rethinking our focus, especially during COVID and post-COVID. The second question I'd like to address is how to best leverage the education, and Marco, going to what you had asked me to talk about, and is how do we leverage the education and business ecosystem in Florence and capitalize on the research that's coming out of the universities. Giorgia had mentioned a number of really interesting projects, which I think will also be reflected in what I'm saying here, which is that we have to really build an infrastructure to support new business and entrepreneurship that comes out of the universities, and create a platform that helps support academic institutions to leverage the research. And some of the key steps that we would need to think about is aligning the job skills with the curriculum, as I said earlier, communicating this to the employers out there, so there's a connectivity there. We need to identify core competencies and promising areas of research already emerging within the universities, and you heard from Giorgia some of them. I watch with great interest the collaboration between the University of Florence and a renewable energy company like iBionet, this intelligent bioenergy network. Very apropos for our times. And we need to provide guidance for our students and faculty on research practices, on regulatory issues, and how to provide for pilot funding, especially for these high impact projects and the focus on them. We need to provide student mentoring at all levels. And I think this is an area that is sorely missing here and has great potential to grow. But it is very much a part of some of the access to talent and management of talent that's happening in other parts of Italy. For example, there's a group called Mentors for You, which I think is the largest mentoring program online, accessible online, and then supported by this incredible network of universities and business leaders. It's based in Milan. The commitment from business leaders also needs to feed back into the universities and support the universities so that they can gain access, students can gain access to the industry experts across all sectors. And I think what Linda was saying about the lectures that we're providing in the city, imagine if we could create a forum for business leaders to also share their knowledge and how to access the workplace. And so, and lastly, I think there's a concerted effort that needs to help in transitioning the students from the universities into a startup innovation community in Florence. And there are a number of startups that are here already, creating more of a hub and a place to pitch ideas where there's funding sources for incubators and accelerators managed again by the leadership within the universities, the private sector, and actually the government, I think, can play a key role. The last question to address, and I'll be brief here, is how American programs, and this will hopefully have more questions, how American programs can integrate more successfully with the city, and how can we American institutions play more a direct role in Florence's knowledge economy. It's clear that there's still too much of a disconnection between US colleges and the culture and way of life in Florence. At SACI, we recognized an opportunity to tap into this wonderful ingenuity here and history and culture of Florence and to contribute back to the society in Florence. So we capitalized on the importance of team building and practical hands-on experience. And this provides connection from academia also into future jobs. We have been collaborating in the past 4 years or so with important institutions in Florence, as well as commercial, fashion, and design sectors such as Ferragamo, Dainese Corporation, and we've collaborated with almost all of the art museums in the city. And I just want to give two very brief examples of the projects that gives a sense of how that can work, and maybe as a model. And I know other universities, I'm sure Stanford and University of Florence are doing similar things. We worked with Dainese Corporation, which is a global leader in airbag technology, and one of the world's best motorcycle designs for racers who crash at high speed and are protected through airbag technology. And we created this interdisciplinary design team of faculty and students, industrial design, product design, fashion design, branding and graphic design, who all collaborated with the CEO of this company to convert this technology into how to create smart wearable clothing for the elderly population to protect against injury from falling. And so there was this transfer of technology and this integration of different disciplines in problem solving, practical real life experience that gets translated into real contributions back to the industry and obviously, portfolio building for the students. Another project we did was with the museum here, the Galleria dell'Accademia, where we established the SACI MX program, which is, we call Museum Experience, where students worked with human-centered design solutions to create ways to improve the experience for the visitor. And one of the examples was working with the Institute for the Blind and Partially Sighted to improve their entire experience. And it was adopted by the director of the Galleria dell'Accademia as part of their maps and wayfinding and experience for the museums. So just to say, I believe very strongly that American colleges can also strengthen ties with Italian academic institutions, the European University of Florence, and share the research and help each other grow and develop innovation in the city. I'll stop there and so we can open up for questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. You spoke about something that I had forgotten to mention, but it's as important as higher education, which is innovation and everything which is nearer to industry, to the manufacturing industry. So I very much welcome your suggestions. We have now the last panelist is Fabrizio Ricciardelli. He's the secretary of AACUPI, which is the Association of American Universities in Italy. So from his point of view, he has a wider view on the world of foreign institution, American institution especially, but not only, based in Florence. So Fabrizio, maybe you can tell us something about the problems that the American universities face, the challenges and the assets also of this town, and how to make the life of foreign students easier in town.
So thank you, Marco, for the invitation, and many thanks to the British Institute for this initiative, which is, I think, very, very important, probably the beginning of a dialogue, which probably should and would start and continue in the future. Yeah, I act as a secretary treasurer of AACUPI, which is the Association of American College University Programs in Italy. My main job is being the legal representative, which means director of Kent State University of Florence. So I combine both professionalities, but mostly, as always happens in life, you use your personal experience and you bring it into the universal one of the world of study abroad. Now, that's what I try to do on a daily basis. So it means that AACUPI is the observatory which collects all the inputs from the other universities. I'm here in front of Professor Campani and Professor Brittan, who are representative of AACUPI as well. And we have common things, common grounds to share, to discuss, and to develop together. I think that Florence has, in terms of attractiveness of students, and evidently being considerable as a sort of meeting point in which culture can be shared by the many, a lot of great responsibility. And I think that this moment here probably can be the beginning of a dialogue between institutions, because I think that we have a very important responsibility as representative of institutions because of the heritage of the city. Florence in itself is a place where the idea of globalization starts. In the Renaissance, the idea of the global citizen, the idea of the Renaissance, the idea of a society which is in itself ideal but perfect to be lived by its citizens. I think that the combination of both, in this case, the University of Florence, which means the public institution of the city, and private institutions like ours, and AACUPI, of course, collects more than 50 programs in the city, is the real secret, is the real starting point of our dialogue and interaction. Florence is not only made by universities. We have a very important and prestigious institutions. I'm thinking to the British Institute now, but also the Kunsthistorische Institute, established in 1897. So Florence in itself has the potential of being considered as a cultural hub. So this is the real thing to be used observed and transformed into something concrete and positive for the future. So in general terms, we have in total more than 90,000 students in the city of Florence. So the city of Florence in itself has a big responsibility with itself. No? So 60,000 more or less from the University of Florence. So we have around 15,000 students in the world of AACUPI. And then we have, as I've said before, the Constitution, the Dutch Institute, and many other institutions. So probably this could be the observatory from which we can start. Now, the creation of a cultural hub, now a physical space in which the interaction, the patrimony of our students who are here for a limited period of time, but who can be used by the institutions themselves to transform their experience in something concrete for the future. I'm convinced that, you know, democracy needs the humanities. No? So this Linda Campani was quoting brilliantly before some examples. I think that I'm following that path because I think that democracy needs culture. And culture is the only possible answer for the future. Florence is the place to be, also now, not only in the past. And the creation of a cultural hub, and I'm thinking and I'm envisioning a physical space in which what was said by my colleagues before could be the theatrical representation of what we have said, you know, common lectures, events, cultural events to be shared among professors, visiting professors, students from every possible kind of nationality can gather together and being creative and propositive for the future. Why Florence? Because I was saying before that democracy needs humanities, because culture is the only possible answer, and because, of course, we need to create a path for having this world existing. And here I go with the practical terms which are related to our world. You, Marco, know perfectly that we need to create a legal path for having the students arriving. Everyone in my world are planning shorter semesters in the spring 2021 because we are in a very critical moment, evidently, but also because we want to bypass the practical problems which are typical of our world. The stay permit procedure, for example. So should we work on creating a sort of easier path for entering the country, because everyone is trying to have their students for less than 90 days for avoiding the visa procedure in America and entering the country without starting the so-called very heavy and long and never finalized stay permit procedure would be a great help to the world. And the option and the opportunity to create an environment in which students can gather easily.
Thank you very much, Fabrizio, also for your concrete suggestions and ideas about the things we should do to improve and to make the life of students easier. Maybe then now I'll pass the floor to Simon to manage the Q&A session.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Marco. Thank you, everybody, for those interesting and provocative interventions. So now it's over to the audience's turn. If you're on the Facebook Live, just post a comment or question into the comments and I will read it out on your behalf. If you're in the Zoom and wish to make a comment or ask a question, and please be brief in your comments, can you just put your hand up in the chat? Just send me a chat to, either to Simon Gamble or to everyone saying I'd like to speak, and then I'll invite you in turn to ask your questions or make your comments. So feel free to put your hand up in the chat now if you'd like to ask a question or make a comment. Whilst people are organizing that, so do you have anyone immediately? No? I've got a question. Quite a big question, but it seems to me that the presence of the international programs, primarily the American programs in Florence, kind of has two characteristics. One is and the bulk is the study abroad programs, where very often undergraduates come, in a sense, in a bubble from their home universities, spend a semester in Florence, very much tied to the home university curriculum and program, with Florence as a beautiful and stimulating backdrop, and then go away again. And that probably is the majority, and it's a form of educational cultural tourism, if you like, from the perspective of the city. The other end of the spectrum is the postgraduate through doctorate and postdoc, where there's a probably much richer opportunity for engagement, collaboration, and contribution, if you like, to the economic future of the city. And whilst we're waiting for other questions, there's one that's starting to come through now. Perhaps just a very brief comment from one or two of you on the balance between those things, and to the extent to which it could be interesting to the American university programs to become significant players in the local research and economic scene. So over to the panel for that.
Can I quickly follow up on your observation, Simon, because this is essential. I mean, I did not elaborate because otherwise I would be much longer than 5 minutes, but this is exactly what we would like to see in place here in Florence, having students, more students than tourists, and among the students, students and researchers who stay longer and perform their duties with more in collaboration with the local university, with the Florence University, or with other foreign universities. So how to encourage this? First of all, this is a small thing, but it's important to streamline the procedure for the permit of stay, which is very cumbersome for the moment. And then trying to stimulate collaboration and with the Florence University. And in this respect, maybe, I don't know if Giorgia certainly she has better ideas and more accurate on the ways to integrate more foreign students, to find a way that they come here not just for a cultural 2 or 3 months stay, but for something which is more significant from the academic and research point of view. Giorgia, or any of you?
I just, I mean, since you called me into that, and Simon was also mentioning these kind of things, we have examples of students which have come here to study abroad, and then they've decided to actually study and do the master in Florence. And I think this is a good signal that there could be, if they get to know the reality also of the University of Florence, then they can stay on. Now, this is, I have 1 or 2 cases, and these are just for students at the BA level that then do a master. There is no one at a little bit more advanced state which decided to do a PhD in Florence University. But I think that this is something on which we could work, especially if we are able to offer some flexible programs that could be formed by several bits and pieces. Linda was mentioning a lot of topics, and those topics are exactly the topics of this project on well-being that I was mentioning, because this is on aging population, on sustainability, on urbanity linked to sustainability, and is also on teacher education. So basically, it's very well organized, this project, exactly for the purpose that we have here of finding common grounds, because the topics are the right topics, also the one that Simon and Steve mentioned, but also there is a package which is reflecting on the teacher education. And I think this could be really important to link our different institutions and our, because I mean, of course, each of us has different skills and different targets in terms of students and different financial situation and so on and so forth. So, but I do believe that using such a project, which is starting, I will invite all of you on the 17th of November on Zoom, possibly, but to start thinking of courses that could be given together by different institutions, courses that can bring to a co-tutel in a PhD program, courses that could be to have the sort of share the skills, like Steve was saying, with or give rise to startups or things like that. I think we should really think of practical things to organize, start with some pilot, which Steve was mentioning, and then explore this kind of road for the future. And I think that could be a very good way.
If I may jump in, I think this is the question you posed, Simon, is a critical one. And there is the common complaint, and for good reason, that the study abroad student here is not really as serious as they could be, and not really, they're tourists, as you say, in the city rather than taking their studies seriously. And I think it's incumbent on all of our institutions, the American institutions, to work with our partner schools or our home schools to adjust our curriculum here. And what is particularly wonderful and unique is we're in Italy, and there is so much opportunity, talent, skill innate within Florence itself and in larger part of Italy that could be learning opportunities that could be part of how we adjust our curriculum for the learning exercises that we create, that I think will attract a much more serious student or give them much more focus, even in the shorter term of the study abroad, the undergraduate level. And I'm thinking of areas where there's, again, competencies here in, for example, just in the craftsmanship and artisanal world. Tremendous learning opportunities that you cannot get in the United States that are unique to Italy in the way that this next generation of skilled craftsmen are manufacturing it with, or doing things with robotics and new technologies in 3D printing, etc. The design industry here is second to none in the world. So it's a huge attractor, and I think, again, making the curriculum more compatible with that and bringing in the students out of that bubble that of just doing or repeat of what they're learning in the States. And then I think with the graduate students, there is a seriousness that comes with it and a length of stay with similar opportunities, I think, and engaging more in the workplace and with the opportunity for internships. The problem is that it's very competitive because it's hard for the young Italians who are graduating to get jobs here. And so we're competing in that ground. So what we have to do is really grow the work opportunities for all students, for all of the graduating students or at the postgraduate level, to be able to continue their studies, because I think that'll also bring them outside of something in the United States that would be keeping them there for work, but bringing them here to continue and contributing beyond their studies in their stay here in Italy.
Before bringing Fabrizio and Linda back in, we got a couple of questions coming in from the audience. Tim Fairhurst wants to ask a question which relates, I think, directly to what we're talking about. So, Tim, if you would like to unmute and put on your camera. There you are.
Sure.
The floor is yours.
Good evening, everybody. I'm possibly an interloper here because my background is tourism rather than academe, but I follow what goes on in Florence closely. And I'm very struck by things that both Linda and Steve were saying about the transdisciplinary opportunities. One of the exceptional challenges around tourism is there really isn't anyone who wears a hat which says, I manage tourism. So there might be an assessore whose responsibilities include tourism, but they do not have the legal competencies to manage it in any way. It tends to be managed at a regional level in Italy. You'll be all familiar with the relationship between Roman regions with regard to tourism competencies. If you're looking for a problem which classically would benefit from a multidisciplinary approach, it's how to manage tourism. And what better city in the entire world to try and make a center of expertise than Florence for here's how to do tourism well in a cultural city. And it's multidimensional. It involves fiscal, transport, all kinds of health and social sustainability issues, as well as environmental. Cultural sustainability, how does a city work? How does the regulatory environment affect accommodation? You name it, tourism's in there somewhere. And it's causing a lot of difficulty. but what a fantastic opportunity. So my challenge would be to sort of academe and the brains trust represented in this group here, fix it. Get the right people around the table. The tourism industry will jump at any opportunity to feed in. No one wants to be seen as the bad guy who's wrecking the city. But there's a real odium about tourism, which we're not addressing. So let's figure out what good looks like in 2030 and make a plan to get there. Because right now, there isn't a plan. I can tell you that.
That's fantastic. Thanks, Tim. Linda. Linda, unmute yourself.
Yes, I know very little about tourism, but I'm struck by what you're saying in terms of the multiculturalism, interdisciplinary rather, that's what I wanted to say, approach to tourism. You know, when you were saying there's no better place than Florence to have such an approach, I was thinking the Renaissance. The Renaissance is the place of interdisciplinarity. And one of the things that really ties in very well with the question of innovation that came up with Steve's contribution before, has specifically to do with the Renaissance. You know, the Renaissance, or Silicon Valley today likes to think of itself as a modern version of the Renaissance, but really what a lot of these students can do in Florence is also come learn about the method of the Renaissance, which is a method of interdisciplinarity, which is a method which privileges a multifaceted approach to knowledge and to academia. So it's interesting, and I think it's a very well taken point that which you're making, that tourism also would benefit extraordinarily from something like this. And as much as we, you know, of course, we don't want to see our students as tourists, and they're not, but in some capacity, you know, these programs are sort of modern versions of the Grand Tour. They're modern and much more democratic, thank God. So also first generation low income students can go abroad and be exposed to what we think is an extraordinarily enriching experience. So I want to say it's a very good point, interdisciplinarity. And I don't know how to solve it on the tourism front, and maybe Marco del Panta, but for what pertains to study abroad, I think that the method of the interdisciplinary method of the Renaissance is very viable, is very fecund, and it's a very fertile ground for innovation today as well.
Can I say a few things, Simon, about this, because this is a very good point about tourism. I mean, not only from the academic point of view, but there's something we're doing in the municipality also from this point of view. But let me tell you something about tourism in Italy, which is one thinks of Italy normally as a tourist destination, but here again, I think that the figures show that it's not a very successful story for our country. I don't know the latest figures, but if you take the figures of some years ago, when I used to deal partially also with these issues, countries like France had twice as many tourists as Italy. So in a normal world, this should not be the case. I think we would also agree with us. So it's not a success story, and we need to have a better development policy. I mean, to increase tourism in this country. And the fact that, as you said, Tim, the competence is divided into 20 regions does not help to have a national strategy. But I mean, this is speaking from a national point of view. Coming to this town, to Florence, we wanted to fill this gap, because it's true that there's no academic initiative in town about tourism. And when I was in Switzerland, I worked for 3 years in Switzerland, I wondered how good the Swiss were, not only in attracting tourists, but also in developing the academic side of tourism. That there are one of the best schools, universities about tourism is in Switzerland, in Lausanne, attracting students from all over the world who pay very high fees and who get a very an excellent education. So one of the, we were launching an initiative on higher education in Florence, which consists also in developing new initiatives in this field. And one of them was exactly in the field of tourism. There's something going on because we would like to close this gap and to have a school of tourism in town. Interdisciplinary, as you said. It's not easy to promote it. We need money, we need spaces, premises, and so on. We need partners because there's, but we're working on this.
So if I may jump again into the conversation, I would like to add something about the idea of higher education bypassing and going beyond the undergrad students who are the majority of our students in the city. And here I see that probably the future can be, and the hub I have in mind is exactly a cultural ideal space in which students can develop and increase their background. Probably gives a big role to the University of Florence, I think, because it is very difficult for us as directors of study abroad programs to create grad level programs, let's say. So in my case, I have none. But some of us have I'm thinking to SACI, for example, being part of a fantastic master program in art history, for example. And I'm thinking to James Madison. So there are many institutions which are offering courses at grad levels. So probably the creation of a sort of, through the University of Florence, using the synergies of these different programs, the creation of a sort of satellite institutions in which, ideally speaking, all the students coming from the study abroad experience can have access through the University of Florence in partnership of the different institutions in the creation of master level programs. This could be something to discuss in the future.
I think I'll take a couple more questions from the Zoom now. Emily Palm has been waiting patiently to ask a question. Emily, have a go. You're still there.
Yes.
Unmute and give us your, there you are.
Hello, good evening, everyone. First, I would just like to thank everyone for the British Institute for organizing this and the panelists for their thoughts and insights on this. So one of the things that struck me at the beginning was this idea of finding ways to increase the number of students who are interested and coming to Florence to study abroad. And I myself am a postdoc in plant biology from the United States, which there are very few of us here. And one of the things that has struck me as I've been trying to find opportunities for kind of integrating with the students here and interacting with them is that it seems to be nearly impossible to have a science course in a study abroad program. And I'm wondering if there has been any conversation about perhaps facilitating that in a way here with the University of Florence, because I am working at the University of Florence, and with the foreign universities that are here. I have tried a number of times to organize with some of the directors of some of the schools, and we keep running into the same problem of the fact that the departments, for instance, the biology department of a certain university doesn't want to organize a course because it would take the students away from all of the the prerequisites that they must do in order to have a biology degree, for instance. And it's incredibly challenging to get a science student to be able to study abroad. They basically just can't. So I'm wondering if there has been some conversation about that within the programs here at all, and if there's some way that we could perhaps integrate with the University of Florence to provide something like a lab space, because I think this might be one of the stumbling blocks for a lot of these courses, that there's no real dedicated space where you could have a science course, even with some microscopes, that study abroad students could use, that could also be used by the rest of the university, say the University of Florence. So has anyone had any sort of conversations about this? That's the end of my question. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. This is a very good point. However, as an American, I think you know very well that that it's not always easy for, you know, it's one thing to talk about American schools in Florence, but it's, you know, there are common denominators, but each one of us has its own agenda, its own students, its own policies and regulations. So let me tell you what Stanford's take on the choice of classes here is, and that is that you know, we bring the students all the way to Florence because we want to teach them things that they would not, which would not be as readily available on the home campus. So there's no point in taking the students to Florence to do microbiology if they could do it as well on the home campus. Now, if by doing microbiology in Florence, something that I know nothing about, there's an added value because there are you know, there's a site relevance, so to speak, then it becomes a different story. However, your question brings in a much broader consideration, a philosophical consideration, and that has to do with STEM students. STEM students, you know, science, technology, engineering, and math, are traditionally the students that have the hardest time going abroad because they have classes in sequence, they have all kinds of things. They have a very stringent curriculum, which makes it almost impossible for them to go abroad. Now, if in keeping with the metaphor pertaining to the Renaissance, you know, I believe that engineering students should come to Florence to learn from the engineers of the Renaissance. And so ultimately, I think you're right in suggesting that we should make science opportunities available to students who want to study in Florence. And Stanford, to a degree, does that already through online classes, Stanford courses, so that if you're an engineering student or a science student and you have to take classes in sequence, you want to come study in Florence, you can take one or two of your own engineering classes online so that you don't go out of sync with your class. So I think it's a good question. It's very well taken, but I don't think there's a one size fits all answer to a question like this.
If I can add on that, because I think what Emily was saying is very relevant for the PhD students as you are. I think it's much easier with respect to the students which have their STEM studies at the BA or master level. It's easier to find lab space. And I think the reason why you don't have a study abroad for science student is exactly what you said, the labs. So I think that on that, we could try to help. That could be one of the initiatives we could try to have, and is to share labs, to have, of course, there are some problems which are like insurance problem for people to get into labs and things like that. But I think that is something that could be organized if there is the willingness for some universities. And to have, for instance, co-tutel in the PhD programs, that could be also a very good thing, both for us as attracting students and for the student that maybe they want to come. And I think on some of the topics, we are ahead, and we have very good labs. So I think it could be very interesting to explore such a possibility.
The world of study abroad is very, very different one to the other. Among the 76 courses offered at Kent State University of Florence, for example, we have 8 courses in biology. We have a biology lab here at Palazzo Vettori. What I don't have is a master level course in biology. I don't have any PhD in biology. So the world of study abroad is changing and is going to uncharted territories, which is very challenging, I think. Thinking that I'm working on aeronautics now, so engineering. So something which is very far from my field and unthinkable a few years ago. But now, so the requests from students at central campuses in the US, it totally changes. Before COVID, I had around 900 students in the galaxy of Kent State students, and many other colleges represented here at Kent State Florence. So what I mean is that probably the undergraduate level could be the starting point after which we can, and we have probably to think the evolution of the world of higher education using Florence as a hub, you know, and the University of Florence, as I was saying before, can give us a great help on this.
I see a note from Sasha Perugini from Syracuse saying that the University of Florence offers STEM courses for undergraduate labs. but there are still some learning challenges with that. I'm sure that there are other universities that are addressing the need for sciences. This doesn't get to Emily's question specifically, but to the point about us our roots being in a Renaissance city. I want to emphasize the fact that there is a move away from purely STEM programs to what we're calling STEAM programs or STEAMed programs, which is adding the art into the design, into the science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. And that's part of the cross-disciplinary approach here. And I think in Florence, there's a unique opportunity, and we have in some of our undergraduate courses introduced some courses in science where it was applicable. For example, when we talked about the elderly design for the smart wearable clothing, we had a teacher come and do a course about the human anatomy of an aging person and from a scientific point of view. So I want to make a point here to say that, again, we shouldn't create too many silos, expand on the STEM programs, add the art component, the creative component of art, and at the end of that, the D is the design, because I think that also is part of our history. Think of science and art from the Renaissance.
I'd like to bring in another question now. Simone Anselmi wishes to intervene. Can you unmute and show us your face?
Okay, good afternoon. Thanks for all the panelists, because I wrote in my board a lot of very interesting things. I've been teaching in study abroad since 20 years in Syracuse and since 6-7 years in Kent State University. And I actually went into this world because I was a trainer, a coach. I work a lot with executives, and I thought that you could work on the experience. You could work on not just teaching subjects, but on developing the soft skills. I actually thank Steve for mentioning the emotional intelligence, because it's one of the things in the area that for me are most important to develop in organizations. I agree that after 2008, we changed a lot the way, and I hope that everywhere, also the University of Florence, the way I teach business-related courses, I think we changed a lot the way we teach courses, because the technicalities are less important. It's much more important the soft skills. And so welcome to new curriculum, welcome to interdisciplinary. I think that we are, many of my colleagues, we are trying to do that. But my point is that if we really want to, I think the key word is to consider, to make the study abroad student as temporary citizen in these 4 months, that maximum 3.5 months that they stay here in Florence. I think that the narrative of the study abroad student has to be changed a little bit, how they're considering the city. I do follow internship, activities, events. I organize some events sometimes to speak with entrepreneurs. The events that also Steve mentioned, they're very interesting. But of course, something more, I think, it has to be done. These students have to be feeling part of the city. And to be honest, I don't see this very often. And this, for me, brings the problem of the tourism. The weekend, they go out everywhere. I know that many of them, they want to see all Europe, but it's also true that maybe they do it because they don't find themselves integrated in the extra school activities that they are in Florence. And I think that this would be relevant to tell them, artisans, where to go, what to visit, also during weekends. And this would be something related to tourism. I think that this time, I hope that will not be wasted to really change not just the courses that will be taught, but also the experience. One thing also to the University of Florence, when I was 20, I used to hang around with a lot of American students, and I was a student of the University of Florence. I don't see this happening anymore. This is probably because of the narrative. We had a lot of difficulties to make our students really hang out with people that are living in Florence. And we try, but it's not easy. I don't know what you think about. Thank you.
Before we answer that question, I'd like to ask Matteo Duni to come in with his intervention as well, and then we'll take them both together because we're beginning to run out of time.
Yes, thank you, Simon. I am the president of the Association of the Scholars Teaching at American Universities in Italy, and I find this debate extremely interesting. I think perhaps one of the silver lining of this terrible situation that we're going through will be that in the aftermath, the whole model of international of study abroad will have to be rethought with smaller numbers of students probably for some time. And this can be an opportunity to increase the level of students' integration to the community. And I think that probably the Comune, the municipality, should take the lead and provide support for the schools and for the students, opportunities for the students to integrate more into the community. And on the contrary, try to discourage the kind of mass experiences like all these ubiquitous pubs and other places to go drink at night, which have also created a negative reputation for Florence in the past. I completely agree with Fabrizio that a great opportunity would be a physical space, sort of a building where events, opportunities for encounter between Italian and American students could be favored. So that would be a great opportunity, and I think the Comune again and Marco del Panta could be an active proponent from this point of view. Also in other fields like, I don't know, encouraging the creation of scholarships for American students sponsored by the city to provide more occasions for a meaningful interaction and mutual knowledge. And I also find extremely interesting what Linda Campani was saying about diversity and racial equity. This, which is a big movement in the States, has been for the past months, very often kind of has a sort of tendency to fall into cancel culture, sort of like a slanted relationship with the past. And I think that Florence, because of the importance of its past and because of what the Renaissance means a new relationship between the present and the past, could be a place where students could deepen their understanding of the relevance of the past and how the past influences our present and how we can critically learn from the past, not erasing it, erasing its weight and influence, but learning from it. So I think it would be a great opportunity to kind of present Florence as the place where past and present encounter and create great learning opportunities for today's US students. Just a final comment, I think that kind of a missing component here is the role that teachers and scholars that have been teaching at American institutions for so many decades can play. There's really an incredible pool of talents here, which has been possible also because of the presence of so many US programs for so long, that it would be a waste for all the players involved not to tap, not to profit from, and to put to good use. Thank you.
Because we're running out of time, I'm just going to allow 3 more very short interventions, and then we'll go around the panel. Everyone gets a final say, because then we're out of time. So I'll just start with one that's coming on the Facebook Live from Luciano Poccianti. In the US, many students enroll into university due to their outstanding athletic skills. What about offering those students the opportunity to collaborate with the local colleges to continue their sports career while studying abroad? So study abroad for elite athletes is the idea there. Then on the Zoom, Rob Sutton-Maddox wants to ask a quick question. Are you there, Rob?
Yes, hello. Yes, I'm here. Yeah, I just wanted to ask a question as a former Erasmus student when I went to Bologna when I was at university. In many ways, the American students in Florence are very lucky because there are so many study abroad opportunities with universities, with campuses there. But for British students, if Erasmus continues, there's a certain level of Italian that students will have to pass an exam in order to go to do Erasmus in Florence. Luckily for me, I was able to pass that. But for many British students, they won't have the knowledge to do that. So what could be offered probably by the University of Florence to encourage British students to go to Florence or to learn a very basic amount of Italian in England before they go to University of Florence for Erasmus.
Thank you, Rob, and Georgia will answer that in a moment. Certainly in the post-Brexit world, we need to have more Brits coming to study in Florence, that's for sure. And I'll just read one last one from the Facebook Live, and then it's over to the panel for a round of concluding thoughts. So from Facebook, this is Eleanor Asciuti from the European University Institute. Good evening. Many thanks for a thorough exchange. It seems that everyone agrees that Florence has already all the ingredients in place, enabling environment, for aspiring to become a global higher education and research hub. Maybe we still need to be enhanced. Maybe what still needs to be enhanced is 1, structured and long-term connections, coordination among all the relevant stakeholders, local authorities, cultural institutions, UNIFI, local international businesses, foreign universities, diplomatic missions and international organizations, NGOs, engaged in locally abroad health institutions, etc. 2, inclusion opportunities for foreign students, researchers, faculty with the local community, i.e. host families. Any views on this, please? So there's 2 things. Okay, lots of coordination and integration required. So over to the panel. Marco, do you want to lead us through the last session? Yeah. You're on mute, Marco.
Sorry, here I am. Very briefly, because we are running out of time. Just to tell something which is known to the panelists, but not to the audience, which is that the municipality has created a informal coordination body among the stakeholders of higher education, exactly to promote new initiatives, but also to attract more students and to create the environment that I was mentioning at the beginning, solving also practical problem of integration of permit of stay, I mean also just very simple bureaucratic problems. The COVID crisis has prevented us from going very much forward with this idea. There was a ministerial meeting foreseen for next week, which has been canceled for the 2nd time, but I mean, we are still there. We are thinking about creating a better environment. As regards the integration of students, I totally agree. I don't think we need a physical space for integration, because there's integration among between the foreign students and the Florence ones. I mean, you just need to go to in front of a bar or a pub at night and you see that the integration is taking place, but it's taking place at that level. We need to have something much more complex and important, which is the integration about in studying, in research, having students who stay longer here, who perform some more interesting from the academic point of view activities, and then have them integrated into the local university and with other foreign universities. This is something much more difficult that we will be certainly trying to do in the future. And also the researcher, I can't remember the name, from the UI, she is saying something very important. We need to have also not only universities and local institutions, but we need to have the whole spectrum of stakeholders together to create a globally attractive academic environment. But maybe the other panelists, they have better ideas.
Who's next? Giorgia.
Okay. Well, I basically will answer to Rob, I think, who posed the question about what are we doing. First of all, we are increasing the number of programs which are in English. Second, we are increasing the number of courses, because we cannot increase too many the programs because there are some stupid Italian rules that sort of bind us the number of courses we can have in English. We are increasing the number of courses which are in English also at the BA level, so that people can come and learn English. My opinion is the following, is that if we offer more courses in English, then people actually also have the incentive to learn Italian. So if they come and have at least 2 or 3 courses that they can attend in English, then they can do an exam in Italian. It's very difficult to expect Erasmus students to do all the exams in Italian, because I mean, it's a difficult language. Of course, we will try to organize more multilingualism courses for a student that want to come from abroad and study an Italian course. In some topics, we don't have English courses, like in humanities, it's very, very difficult to find English courses. And for those, I think we can, I'm sure that depending on where in UK, but there are courses which are all right, we can just try to organize better, because for instance, when you come to Florence, all the students Erasmus have free Italian courses also. So we can try to organize them maybe online beforehand, so that when they come, they already know something. And I think that is something which could be done. Someone was mentioning the opportunity for higher integration. I think was Simone, who said that there was not enough integration between the students. We are very willing, and we have a lot of students which are, for instance, Linda knows some of them, the multicultural tutor. They're very willing to mix with students in American universities and other institutions. So we are hiring students as tutor, and they are very, very happy to help also students from other institutions to integrate better. And what we are organizing are leaflet, which are called From Student to Student, where the student tell them where to go and have an ice cream, and this kind of information, which are things that the student, make the student living more. We use them for the Erasmus and international student, but that can be obviously extended to all our partners. And I think that is a way for American students to feel more at home if they can do that. And I think the rest is to have more courses in common and more initiative in commons. The one that we mentioned today, just the last word is, I think what is absolutely crucial is what Linda said about the trainship, and some other people picked up on that. I think that will be a really good way to, and maybe we could have sort of twin trainship, one Italian and one American student doing a partnership in a traineeship. We could organize something like that, and that could be interesting way to mix the student, and at the same time to enhance the possibility that the students are not here for a short period, but they come back also for work.
Linda.
Yes, thank you. Just very briefly, going off from what Giorgia just said. Well, first of all, I'd like to say that we're not necessarily, at least from our perspective, we're not necessarily interested in attracting more students to Florence. I mean, it's not only a matter of quantity. We have students who want to come back. It's the quality of the experience that we got to give them, which needs to be top-notch, and it also needs to take into account, as far as I can tell, what I mentioned before. So it's, you know, the more the merrier, but it's not necessarily going to be American students. You know, it could be students from China, from India, from all over the place. So this is one quick thing that I wanted to say. The other thing about integration, Marco, you ought to look more carefully. You ought to look more carefully, because there is a very high degree of integration. I actually am not happy to hear the same old story about the bars and the cafes and the American students. You know, they're going to have fun. We all had fun when we were at their age. Our students, not simply the same for students, the American students are involved in public service activities. They do internships. They have friends at Firenze. So they have language partners from the University of Florence with whom they exchange all kinds of things. So I think there is, I mean, there's always room for improvement. There's always an internships. I like your idea, Giorgia, of a co-internship with a foreign student and an Italian student. There's this group of University of Florence students, this international group of students. They're extraordinary. They come talk to us. So there are isole di virtuose. There's virtue, there's great things, and we need to not fall prey to the same old story whereby American students come to Florence just to have a drink. If anything, the Comune should make sure that who sells them drinks doesn't overdo it. The very final point is the notion of and the need that there be a sort of a census and an integration among the cultural institutions in town, European University Institute, first of all, the University of Florence, and the American schools and other schools. There's a plethora of such things. My friend, former president of the University of Florence, Paolo Blasi, is the president of a Scuola per l'Arte Sacra in the Cascina. It's a jewel, it's an extraordinary thing. So we have to put all of these things on a map. When you see Dario next, please remind him of the project that he had before he joined politics. When he was still a university professor, he was about to launch a program called Firenze Sapere. The idea was exactly the one that I just described, to map all of the cultural institutions that are present in town. Let's first count heads, and then we sit down and decide what to do with them, how to promote a good interlocution among all of us. And thank you. That's the end of what I wanted to say.
Thank you, Linda. Fabrizio, I'm going to give Steve the last word. Fabrizio. You're muted. Fabrizio, you're muted. You have to unmute. There you go. Now you're unmuted.
Okay. No, I was thinking when you were talking, I think that's, as I said before, we have a variety of options in front of us. I think that the heritage that Florence is bringing with itself, it's a great responsibility for all of us. And as I've said, if we are able to design a future of real higher education, going beyond the undergraduate students who are the majority in our world, in joint venture with the University of Florence, using the synergies of the different study abroad institutions which are gathering in the city, I think that we can create a very paradigmatic example. Florence can be transformed in something to be studied in the future. And we go back to what at the end of the 1400s, everyone was trying to imagine, the ideal city. So when Machiavelli writes The Prince, he's thinking to the ideal politician, the ideal leader. But in the same time, the same period of time, to go back to what Linda was saying before, the Renaissance, now the place in which innovation is starting, will give again to Florence the input for which it was created. And this is the auspice I'm sharing with you tonight.
Thank you very much, Fabrizio. And Steve, you have the last word. Don't know why I gave it to you, but you got it. Make good use of it.
Okay, I'll do my best. Well, just to say that I've thoroughly enjoyed this conversation, and it's just hearing the input also from the audience in this strange time that we live in, all through the screen. The richness of ideas that came through, I think, are really worth noting and building upon, and it's just very encouraging. I think the city is not short of subject matter. There's such a rich history, and there are a number of initiatives, and not to albeit including the ones we've talked about. The Rinasce Firenze, for example, has thematic areas that are full and rich with content of a new city, of an increased intelligent city, and the development of the economy and a green mobility. I would just end it by saying that the future is in the hands of the next generation. We talk about Generation Z, and now there's the Alpha generation, and they face huge, huge challenges. And so what I would encourage us to all think about as educators is how do we channel the future with this next generation in a way that taps into this marvelous history of Florence from its past, but all the opportunities it offers for the future, and leverage that talent and focus it in a way that we don't squander the opportunity, and also don't leave ourselves in the precarious situation that our forefathers have left us in.
Very good thoughts. Thank you very much, Steve. It just remains for me to do two things. First of all, I put out my traditional plea for anyone who feels minded to make a modest donation to help the British Institute keep going through this time when we are losing a huge amount of revenues because of COVID. Sarah's just posted the link for our crowdfunding on the chat screen. So those who would like to just help us a little bit, it'd be gratefully appreciated and well received. moving on to thank the panel for a terrific job. Thank you very much indeed for your time and for your insight into this really important subject matter. It's been a really great discussion. Thank you to the audience for some very rich contributions as well. And I feel that this is a conversation that we're just starting, and people on the panel and in the audience who want to take it forward, we at the British Institute are very happy to be a part of that going forward as well. So thanks, everyone. Our next session of the Future of Florence series is about manufacturing and the bottega, how to find the balance between commerce and tradition in that area. And it is on Thursday, the 5th of November. So it will, I fear, probably be a Zoom-only occasion, though we will move back to hybrid just as soon as we feel safe to do so again. Thanks, everyone, and good night. Bye.
Bye.